First of all, good evening, everyone. This is Vikram, and thanks for the warm welcome, all of you, and WRC for organizing this event. So basically, when Ketan sir told me about an idea about hosting this event in this particular period, I thought there cannot be a better time to hold this kind of an event now when India is at the cusp of grabbing all the global whatever potential opportunities available to us, and also in light of our honorable PM's vision of creating global accounting Indian accounting firms. So I think this is the perfect time for us to go through. Sir or Fennel sir also mentioned quite a lot of expectations about from the participants, which you all would like to hear as a part of this presentation. So I wouldn't just conscious of time, I wouldn't spend a lot of time on introduction and stuff. Sir has already introduced me, but I have tried to divide this session in potentially 3 to 4 parts, right? As Sir mentioned, there are quite a lot of economy related news which happen or which are potentially displayed in India as well. So probably I would start with demographic considerations, because irrespective of our individual capabilities, irrespective of our talent, I think quite a lot of things also depend on the demographic considerations between or relations between two countries. By way of demographic considerations, I would be focusing mainly on some recent trends just to give you a perspective of how big the market is. Not necessarily talking at very high level of what economy is doing, how much it is growing. Obviously, I can share some very brief light on it, but just to give you a perspective of how much trade that happens and how much trade which is relevant to us as a chartered accountant is happening between India and UK. I would also like to touch upon India-UK FTA, which was signed just a month ago, which would definitely have major implications on our profession in the year to come, and I will explain that in detail as well. Probably what Sir mentioned as holding 2 COPs and the recent announcement are potentially made in light of the recent FTA which was signed in and the provisions which are included there. Again, if I look at it practically, right, from members in practice point of view, obviously it's everyone needs a start to cater to different markets. So I'm just going to put some data here in front of you in terms of Indian presence in UK, because if we were to target the UK market, naturally we would be knocking on our Indian community in UK for the first opportunity or for the first break which we would want. So potentially that is something I would touch upon. As Sir briefly mentioned as well, because we are considered as guardians on all financial fronts, potentially what matters is also the certification. While we are the members of ICAI, when we enter into a different geography, we would necessarily need to have some sort of certification to leverage our experience and to have that visibility in the UK market. So I can put a detailed light on how the pathways work between ICAI, which is Indian CA Institute, and ICAEW, which is Institute of England and Wales, because I personally feel ICAI has done incredible work in this area, and it's more that qualification is more of an easy win for us going forward. Then after analyzing the overall trends data, we would probably go into the scope for members in practice. Now again, it's a very subjective topic. There is no clear path of following one particular set of principle, one particular set of guidance. However, what I have tried to do is I've tried to kind of put a light on overall regulatory landscape, as in what sort of regulatory provisions or regulations are applicable for UK. I would try to compare it with the Indian regulations or Indian way of working things in each of the area. And as Sir mentioned, I have tried to cover quite a lot of non-audit services as well as audit services and what kind of framework nuances with respect to UK market that exists, which I feel probably would be a good starting point for all of us or any member who's willing to explore this UK market. Um, I'm pretty sure there would be few people, there are opportunities open as well for employment, not necessarily for members in practice. So, and I am one of them, right? I mean, I went to UK to explore opportunities under employment scenarios. So potentially I can share my first-hand experience, few nuances as well, because not necessarily with slowing economic growth and everything, it would be easier for members to find, but definitely there is no hindrance for UK market as far as Indian chartered accountants are concerned. Lastly, with different countries being involved, there are always some challenges around immigrations. The way you would be watching news in recent past, be it America, be it Western countries, there are quite a lot of immigration norms which tighten up. And why I thought I would include this, because quite a lot of times immigration rules play a major role for us to kind of cater the market, or kind of for us to explore those opportunities. So that's why it's really important for us to have a quick overview on immigration considerations as well. Last but not the least, I have put in together some easy links, for whatever scope we are going to discuss as a part of our members in practice section. I have put in some links which could be easy starting point for you or any member to have a look at, get an understanding of what. I mean, again, with AI, the world is at our fingerprints. We can put question in Copilot and we can get the answers. But whenever we are trying to explore new markets, we just want to do some sort of background check, we want to refer to various examples which are available in the market. So for each kind of services, I have tried to put websites which are authorized government websites or government agencies website. The good thing about UK is also that the processes are so simplified and explained on the government website, so that it could be a real good starting point for any member trying to explore those opportunities abroad. So I think sir already introduced, but just a quick introduction. I qualified way back in 2014. All my life I have been involved in assurance, mainly statutory audit focused on financial services space. I did my articleship from MHA, did my first 4 years as a qualified CA with Grant Thornton, purely focused on the financial services audit. But within financial services, I did get an opportunity to get exposed to various sectors like insurance, insurance, asset management as well. I can see one of my ex-colleagues as well, Lokesh here, from Grant Thornton. I kind of moved to EY London in search of new geographies, trying to test new horizons and trying to adapt all those global practices well in advance so that I could implement it, and one day I can come back and I can kind of leverage those practices, those learnings in practice. With audit now, I have also moved into technical side of things, wherein I'm a part of EY's UK and Ireland Professional Practices Directorate team, which handles the all the technical matters, or is behind having those audit methodology or audit quality. So this is a small introduction. While we are at this, let me just start with demographic considerations as well. And just feel free to raise your hands, ask me questions, or if you want anything specific or any specific to your field or anything, we can obviously discuss in person as well post this. Ethan sir had asked me to put in some time for question answers as well, so I do have some time at the end for the question answers. Now, just in terms of the demographic trends, right? As I mentioned, I've already discussed as to why these trends are important. But in terms of demographic considerations, I've broken it down into 4 parts. One is the recent trend of exports and imports, which also includes our services. right? And this is the data which was published by UA's Department of Trade and Business, which is equivalent to our Commerce Ministry. So the total trade, or the total trade between UK and India, is almost 44.1 billion pounds, which is approximately, at today's conversion rate, around 500 lakh crores, which is humongous. As you can see, this data is from April to March, but if you can see in all the columns, the year-on-year increase has been in double digits almost in all cases, which kind of sets you a tone that yes, there is a market in UK, there is a market and there is an increased interaction with India, and that market is growing. The key thing, even when I was analyzing the data, the one thing which caught my attention was the number of UK imports. The UK import, so basically from Indian point of view, we are in a trade surplus scenario wherein we are exporting more to UK than importing. And even if you look at the imports, total UK imports, those have been growing at a rate of 14.3%, which is humongous, and that too before the FTA is put into place. Now, this is the overall trade picture. What, in my view, concerns us is the kind of services, right? Because our chartered accountancy services fall within the services bracket. But majority, around 60% of all the UK imports are in the form of services, which is around 15.3 billion, which again is 14.5% increase. So I think just the objective or the message what I just wanted to put it across by way of this slide is mainly the kind of market, right? Like we have everywhere in Shark Tank, what is the market size? I think as far as our chartered accountancy professional services are concerned, our market size should be determined basis this data, which is already showing positive signs year on year, right? Then obviously this is a very high level, so what I thought is might as well give you all a picture of what exactly are the services which are being imported by the UK, right? And this is where, and this is all published on the UK government website. It's not something which I have created on my own. But if you look at the overall imports which UK does, quite a lot of these are coming from other business services, which is around 9.6 billion. So if you look at the 15.3 billion of imports, 9.6 is coming from the other business services. Now you can check it online as well, but then the classification is in line with WTO guidelines. So if you look at the definition of other business services, what caught my attention was majority or the predominant part of that definition is our professional services, be it technical, legal, architectural, it could be anything. Obviously we don't have a breakup at chartered accountancy or by profession, but then if you look at the overall data, 9.6 billion. So if I were just to tell you, because obviously these are all invisible, we can't see these services being imported on day-to-day basis sitting in our offices, right? But if I were just to give you a sorry, yeah.
Can I interrupt to ask
Yeah.
a question? Quite curious to know
6
billion.
Yeah.
So over the last 10-15 years, there's been a lot of offshoring.
Yes.
ICCs,
Yes.
be it technical,
Yeah.
IT, and
Yeah.
financial services.
Yes.
Is that part of
Yes,
this?
that is a part of this, and I would just like you to hold back for a minute, because the next slide would make it clear, because I had gone through the same thought process as you, as in, what are these 9.6 billion? Because the thing which catches or which caught my attention was, in grand scheme of things, the UK import on travel is only 1.4 billion. So what we are trying to say here is professional services are 5 to 6 times the amount of travel imports or travel related imports, which is a huge thing, right? So, and as you mentioned, I'll just cover that point on the next slide, but this is the kind of magnitude or the market which we already have, and this is the data until June 2020, first quarter of 2025, which is March 2025, that is before our FTA coming into effect. So obviously with our slides later on, we can see the growth potentials as well. Again, in terms of the UK exports, what we are consuming from UK, obviously not necessarily relevant, but it's more of travel. And even that, our export of business services are more than the imports what we do on account of travel, which kind of gives us an idea as to how significantly large our market is. Now coming back to ma'am's question, right? What we have analyzed further is basically if all these business services are kind of imported by UK, in which form? Are these people going abroad for forming their subsidiaries, forming their companies, forming their whatever partnerships, going there, earning money, and then resulting into an export? Or is it just an export wherein people are here, services are being performed here, however they are being consumed in another country, right? And again, this is all government data. It is in line with what WTO defines, which I'm not close to, but this is how I read. In terms of the modes, right, of control, if you look at the mode 1, which is remote trade, a supplier in one country sells services to a customer in another country without movement of people. So, ma'am, just to answer your question in terms of the GCCs or outsourcing, or there are different names, what we call it, be it GCC, global, deliveries, department, or KPOs to that extent, probably those would fall in our mode 1 because people are not moving but we are exporting service. And if you look at the chart which is coming in from the Department of Trade and Business, 75% of the services which are imported by UK are in the form of mode 1, which is potentially would represent all those GCC services because there are no transfer of people happening there.
It's being delivered out of India.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Firms in the UK.
Exactly, without moving Indians out to another country. And even if you look at the mode 1 and mode 2, which account for nearly 90 to 95%, wherein Indians are traveling abroad to provide those services, we cover almost 90% of the total imports which UK does. So I think that gives us an overall trend or an idea that yes, we have a huge market. Yes, we do have a huge market and huge imports related to our own services, and plus we do have a huge market wherein we don't necessarily want to or have to travel or relocate to UK, but quite a lot of imports are happening based on people residing or people being in India. So I think that is just the whole narrative I just wanted to put in terms of the import and export of services, which would include our services as well, just to give you a clarity that yes, there is a market, huge market and a growing market. Now, this is purely related to our services, right? But what I thought is to also cover some trends in the foreign direct investments. Now, obviously, we are not doing a startup here, or the purpose of the session is not for the startup. But what clearly gets signified through this chart is the amount of confidence and the amount of FDIs which are flowing in from each country to another, and the increasing trend. And as we always see, with increasing trends, with increasing interaction, with increasing new business ventures, there are incoming compliance opportunities for chartered accountant, opinions, restructuring, or taxation related matters which would come in. So just to give you a perspective from 2014 to 2023, this is the data which is 1 year in lag on their website. The FDI investments from India to UK have gone from around 2 billion to 12.4 billion, and UK's investment into India have come from 13 to 17.5, which is like a 6-fold increase in last 10 years. This also signifies the increasing confidence which probably both countries share in each other's business, and the increasing environment which is kind of suitable to make investments and do business. and with that, I'm sure there would be a lot of entities which would be coming in, to form their offices, their subsidiaries, their permanent establishment here, which indirectly creates work for all of us as chartered accountants. Now, in spite of showing you all the data, in spite of showing all the figures here, we are still the 11th largest trade partner as far as UK is concerned. So, if you look at it in the grand scheme of things, we still, as far as UK market is concerned, we still have quite a lot of the market to capture potentially, and not just the India UK past trends, which that is the external market other than India is potentially still more, because we just account for 2.4% of the overall trade UK does with other countries. And I think the FTA, which has been brought into force last month, is going to help us, and I can tell you how it is going to be beneficial in coming slides. Now, as I mentioned, this is all about the figures what we discussed, right? But then practically, if we want to really crack opportunities, or if we want to explore opportunities, I just wanted to put around the facts as to how Indian community or diaspora is widely spread in the UK, right? So based on a survey which was done by one of the leading consulting firms in UK, there are approximately 1,200 Indian-owned companies. Now, why I'm focusing on these is potentially because the way things work practically is Indian-owned companies would necessarily have some presence in UK, which could be potentially our door to knock if we were to start our practice, or if we were to start exploring UK market. Now, again, in this, you can see year-on-year increase of 23%. This is just in terms of the number of companies registered with UK's Companies House, which is Companies House in UK is equivalent of India's Ministry of Corporate Affairs. So that is how the growth is clearly visible. The revenue of these Indian-owned companies is approximately 72.14 billion. Now, if you look at it from a slide point of view, yes, it appears huge, but it could be also, it also includes the Indian subsidiaries of Indian conglomerates which are based in UK as well, right? That's what makes this number bubble up, but that doesn't take away the credit of widely spread Indian diaspora which is currently present in the UK. Just in terms of number of people, yeah, I'm not sure, but you might have heard in the news, or you might have heard from people traveling to UK, there are Indian restaurants all across everywhere. So Indians apparently make 3% of the population of UK, which is approximately 2 million Indians. Now, this number, in my view, would be on the lower side, because quite a lot of Indians would have given their citizenship and being our UK citizens with having overseas citizen of India card. So, but 2 million still is not a small number, and it just gives you a density and the extent to which Indians are residing in UK. As far as chartered accountants within those Indians are concerned, we do have ICAI UK chapter as well in London, and there are approximately more than 650 ICAI members which are there are more than 650 ICAI members which are registered with ICAI. That just gives us a confidence that yes, there are people moving to UK, finding their base in UK and in London, and potentially these would be our first doors to knock if we were to start networking or exploring some opportunities. So I think this is all about India, UK, overall market, the overall density of Indian, unless anyone has any questions at this point in time. No. Cool. Now, I will move from the statistics and data to the FTA, and it is also related to the announcement or the view which Fennel sir just mentioned about having two COPs at the same time. Now, this is not something which is concluded yet, so potentially as a members, we would like to keep an eye out on this development, because this is a pretty major development as far as demography of two nations is concerned. So it would have been in the news back in India. It was in news in UK as well, to a greater extent, that our Honorable Prime Minister signed India-UK Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement last month on 22nd of July. Now, what does that mean for us, right, as chartered accountants in practice? I think the FTA, I have been through it. There are 29 annexures to FTA. That is how comprehensive that FTA is. There is a specific annexure for goods, tariffs, innovation, technology, and whatnot. And one of the annexures, which is annexures 8A, relates to professional services on its own, right? So that's how focus has been placed on professional services, which of course includes chartered accountants and other professional services too. So Article 8A of that FTA is paving way for mutual recognition of qualifications as far as both the countries are concerned. Now, this is something which is agreed in principle and has been left to respective parties to decide within next 12 to 36 months and come up with actual procedural guidelines. However, if you look at the tone of this, I think what FTA is trying to set is trying relative working groups which are to be formed to kind of create a roadmap to bridge the gap between professional qualifications subject, CPE requirements, and how one can leverage with others. So that is something which FTA has asked working group to do. Now, what is the impact of this, right? When we talk about mutual recognition of professional qualification, it could potentially, again, this is not something final, this is not something which has come on paper, but it could also entitle us to be called as chartered accountant or designated as chartered accountant in UK, of course with some preconditions. Again, just to clarify, this is not something which is put on paper, but this is something which has been included in the FTA, and you can very much look at the Annexure 8A if you just want to have an idea. So potentially from all of us in terms of the CA fraternity in India, we would like to keep an eye out, because if that is something which gets crystallized in due course, potentially we would come at some par with ICAEW chartered accountants as well, which would open up the door to provide quite a lot of services, which I'll come later on as to how that works in terms between two institutes. So this is about the India-UK FTA. Now, having said that, we spoke about mutual recognition here through FTA. But as Fennel sir mentioned, ICAI has already done an incredible amount of work in getting the MOU signed with overseas institute. And one of them, as rightly mentioned by Fennel sir, is the MOU registered and signed with ICAEW. So just to give you a perspective, that is not necessarily a requirement, but then obviously having the degree, having a recognition as chartered accountant in that country definitely gives us a better visibility in front of the clients. So, and it's, in my view, it's an easy win because of the work which is already done by ICAI and MOU signed. So under this, ICAI members with who are members for more than 5 years can become members of ICAEW directly just by passing one examination, which is called examination of experience. So basically, if we are members of ICAI for more than 5 years, there is a pre-designated 5 to 6 questions which we need to be answering in light of the experience what we have. So the questions are also directed in a way that it asks you about your professional experience in any field, right, and how you accomplish the questionnaire or the criteria which are being asked in the questions. So I think with one that experience paper, we should be able to get a membership of ICAI EW. So technically we would be a chartered accountant in England and Wales as well if we are the members. Now going a step further from membership, if we are member of ICAI EW for 2 years, then we are eligible to get practicing certificate as well of ICAI EW. Again, as in India, there is no specific examination to apply for this, but obviously it comes with quite a lot of CPE requirements as well, which we need to follow later on once we get the practicing certificate. Now, why practicing certificate is important and why something that we as members of ICAI should be aware of is there are quite a lot of regulatory requirements in England and Wales which would necessitate a practicing ICAEW with practicing certificate to be the attester or to be the person who's giving comfort on something. So quite a lot of services get covered under the ICAEW statement on members engaging the public practice, wherein public practice is defined as anything, right, wherein we are signing off or we are doing it for UK based company or entity in UK for a fee. Now there is a separate annexure as well in this statement which I have not reproduced, but if you want you can go through it on the ICAI website. However, the bookkeeping services, the payroll services, the tax opinion related matters, the tax compliance services are all covered by this statement. Meaning, if we were to opine to a UK client in our capacity of ICAEW member, we need to hold this practicing certificate, and without which we cannot sign opine on it. So this is basically a UK specific regulation what we need to check. Apart from that, if you were to evaluate and if you were to consider having membership and practicing certificate, there are quite a lot of other regulatory requirements which are not necessarily akin to what we have here in India. One is obviously requirement to hold practicing certificate, pretty much similar, but something about professional indemnity insurance. So those who are in practice in UK need to have certain amount of professional indemnity insurance as well. There are specific regulations in UK. Those holding UK's practicing certificate would need to be aware of these regulations and need to take a professional indemnity insurance. Otherwise, it's kind of a breach of those regulations and it can impact our practicing certificate and our ability as well. Now again, there are some practice assurance regulations, the way in which the practitioner is supposed to work, and there are some AML regulations as well which put some onus on the members who are in practice to comply with some AML requirements when they onboard the clients. So these are the key things. But in summary, the message is, I think with this MOU, I think it is pretty easy for members of ICAI to have a CA degree in UK, CA designation in UK, and also obtain the CA practicing certificate as well in UK. When we talk about the requirement for practicing certificate, ICAEW also recognizes the tenure of Indian CA and Indian membership towards that 2-year requirement. So I think this is predominantly easy. One more example which Fennel sir gave is ACCA as well. So in UK there are 3 institutes basically which are recognized in as chartered accountant or in the capacity of chartered accountant. One is ICAEW, which is the main institute of England and Wales. There is one institute for Scotland as well, which is called ICAS, Institute of Chartered Accountants of Scotland, and ACCA as well, which is a global recognition for which we have exemptions as well as ICAI members. But the predominant one is ICAEW. I think this is this was more about having that certification and having that base if we want to explore, and in terms of the educational or certification requirements which we might have to comply with if we were to explore the opportunities. Any questions or anything, or can I move forward?
Other than these degrees, there are degrees like CFE, CIA,
Yeah.
but they are US based. So,
Yes.
so does it hold importance
Yeah.
in UK as well?
Yeah, so in my experience as well, and based on the knowledge what I have, yes, CFE, CIA, which are US-based institutes as well, but these are global recognition, and these get recognized in UK as well. So CFE, CIA are more from internal audit or SOX point of view, and those would be recognized if you were to apply for jobs or if you were to kind of put your profile forward for practice purposes. Yeah. There are few more qualifications as well, field specific, which I would come to that later on when I'm covering this members in practice. But yes. Anything or yeah. So as far as members in practice is concerned, the way I have tried to construct these slides is mainly just trying to first understand what kind of services we as chartered accountants provide in India, right? And then what are the nuances with UK specific as well, right? As sir and ma'am rightly mentioned in the presentation as well, quite a lot of focus these days is given on the global capability centers. Now these global capability centers can be in the form of anything. If I was to look at the global accounting firms, they have their own business vertical as well. If I which cater to different geographies, be it US, be it UK, and whatnot. It could be also in the form of some kind of affiliation with the international firms as well, wherein international firms subcontract the work to the Indian firms, wherein we as an Indian firm do not face the client directly but are working in tandem with those firms based in UK or any other geography. Or else, apart from that, there are quite a lot of services we as a professionals could give to our Indian clients who have global presence, right? Because that just gives us a stepping stone in the client, which we can utilize our leverage, and we can have a better visibility on the foreign counterparts, because quite a lot of times with the imports, exports, whatever we have seen till now, quite a lot of time their IT infrastructure is same, their policies are same, their processes are same, and quite a lot of times if as a part of dealing with Indian clients, we end up dealing with their counterparts as well in UK and US. So that just sets up the tone in terms of members in practice, and that is where I think members could potentially concentrate if they were to start exploring these opportunities. Apart from that, there is quite a lot of NRI based in UK who have their roots back in India, right? So quite a lot of Indian compliance work for people stationed abroad is also one of the growing service offerings which we have seen in recent past in UK as well, or UK based Indian chartered accountants are helping people there to manage their compliances back in India. So before we go on to a respective service, I just really want to touch on high level, because these are critical regulations which might be of use if we were to provide any services. While doing this, I would also correlate to our Indian accounting standards, Ind AS, or the old accounting standards, because quite a lot of that there is an overlap with UK as well. So in terms of the Companies Act, like we have Companies Act 2013 amended several times after that, there is a UK Companies Act 2006. The structure of UK Companies Act is pretty much similar to that of Indian Companies Act. The kind of the flow of the act, the sections of the act are pretty much similar. As far as we as members in practice are concerned, potentially if we were to look at Companies Act as our service offering, we generally have something like company formation, something like drafting articles of association or setting up the company, and then the accounting framework and the bookkeeping, which I will come to separately later on in the slide. So these are the sections. Pretty easy. This process of setting up a company in UK is very easy. It could be done online within 20-25 minutes if we were to do if we were to set up private limited company by shares and by guarantee. It's a pretty simple process which can be followed on Companies House website as well. Now it doesn't take quite a lot of time, quite a lot of efforts, quite a lot of energy as well. There are standard articles of association as well which can be adopted. So there is no specific need that we need to draft client specific. Obviously, if client or entity wants, we could, but then we did not have necessarily put quite a lot of efforts in those drafting articles of association or memorandum of association like that. The overall accounting framework or accounting requirements laid down by Companies Act are also pretty much similar to what we have in India as well. So basically, the overall regulatory structure when it comes to preparation of accounts and the scrutiny of accounts is something pretty much similar, wherein Indian like the Companies Act refers to the accounting framework, which are now drafted by NFRA or prescribed by NFRA. Similarly, we do have section 395 to 407 which refer to the accounting framework to be followed. Companies Act, these sections would also give you quite a lot of information around preparation of financials, preparation of strategic report, or preparation of all the directors related statements which are mandatorily required to be made. So in UK, each company or companies above some thresholds are required to do strategic report, directors report, and quite a lot of analysis which is required to be done by directors, right? So as a part of bookkeeping, yes, other than the accounting entries, quite a lot of services are being provided to assist directors or management in preparation of financial statements, and mainly the directors' specific filings and compliance statement as well. So these sections 395 to 407 set up what companies need to have as a part of their books of accounts. They also give you quite a lot of exemptions in preparation of consolidation accounts. They do also talk about quite a lot of framework like small company framework, wherein the disclosure requirements or the requirement for audit is not required. So there are quite a lot of frameworks within Companies Act which your client could follow, and basically if you have a read through or look at these sections, potentially we can suggest them the smoother or the most convenient way which could help them to avoid getting the accounts audited. I mean, it would be self-certified, signed off by directors and filed with MCA or Companies House in UK. There are exemptions around preparation of consolidated financial statements as well for companies which are mentioned in here, and there are quite a lot of other requirements as well regarding dividend calculation and ancillary services which UK clients might approach members in practice if we were to approach cater to UK clients. So these are the three key sections from our service point of view in the Companies Act as well. When it comes to the accounting framework, now companies in UK predominantly follow IFRS and UK GAAP. Now, why I say IFRS and UK GAAP? The listed entities are required to follow IFRS in UK. Under UK GAAP, there are these 4 standards. Now, FRS 100 is just the application of financial reporting requirement, which sets the framework. But then 2 standards for normal entities are FRS 101 and FRS 102. Now, just to give you an idea, because this would be one of the critical parts when we go to bookkeeping and accounting services as well. So members who prepare their the entities which prepare their consolidated financial statements under IFRS can opt for FRS 101, which is a part of UK GAAP, not a IFRS. What does that mean? FRS 101 is nothing but a UK GAAP component wherein UK GAAP tells you that you can follow the recognition and measurement, like the way you account for it, as per the IFRS. But because in IFRS the disclosures are too large, right, or too cumbersome, there are some exemptions given for UK based entities that, okay, fine, you account as per IFRS, but you can get exemption in disclosing few items when you are doing the preparing the financial statements. So this is FRS 101. The other thing is FRS 102, which is basically generally followed by small and medium price enterprises, like the private entities like we have here, or small scale entities. They tend to follow FRS 102. Now these standards are pretty much similar to what we had under old ICAI accounting standard, not even Ind AS, but before that, right? It's available on the FRC website. It is almost a 152-pager standard, wherein one section refers to one accounting standard, like we had accounting policies, inventory, cash flow, and whatnot. So these are pretty much similar. I wouldn't obviously, as a members we can refer to it, but practically on very high level and detailed level as well, I don't see quite a lot of differences between UK GAAP and Indian GAAP in terms of UK GAAP. FRS 102 does not have lot of clarity around financial instrument. So as a good practice, members in UK refer to FRS 101 when it comes to financial instruments, their accounting and their disclosure. So these are the three standards potentially we should be looking at. At the end of the presentation, I have put in the link as well, wherein you can find all these accounting standards together. You can have a read through. I don't mind sharing this presentation after the training as well through WIRC. And then FRS 103 to 105 are basically for insurance contract, which are industry specific. So I wouldn't go in detail here. But again, if you were to look at it, these are all available on one link. Anyone, any questions or clarification? Yeah, just in terms of auditing standards, I think FRC in UK, which is equivalent to NFRA in India, has adopted UK auditing standards. Again, these are adopted from global ISAs, global international standards on auditing. They have been localized to some extent for UK, but if I was to compare it on overall basis, there is not much of a difference, or at least there is no difference which major difference in auditing standards as per in India and in UK. So it is pretty much similar there. In terms of the taxation, which we would be covering as well, so like we have one Income Tax Act 1961, I think there are a couple of acts which we need to be aware of when we are looking at providing taxation services. One is around Corporate Tax Act 2010, which is relating to the taxation provisioning of tax for the UK corporate entities. Income Tax Act 2007 is the principal legislation which covers the personal income tax, like our individual taxation. Again, just to give you a holistic idea, the way Corporate Tax Act in 2010 in UK is pretty much similar. If we were to compare, or if we were to prepare a computation of income for an entity in UK, it would start in the similar way, wherein we start with profit before tax. Then there are some allowances, disallowances as well. We do take credit for some DTAA, wherein people have presence in different geographies, and And the deferred tax concept from accounting point of view also works similar in UK, wherein we just create deferred tax on the temporary taxation differences, which are mainly on account of depreciation or losses carry forward and stuff like that. So overall, the provisioning is governed by this act. Income Tax Act 2007, which affects people in UK. There are quite a lot of individual practitioners who cater to individuals within UK who do have some, outsourcing, or I would say capability centers or connections with Indian firms. So there are some firms existing within UK which have employees or base here in India, wherein the actual work gets done. In terms of the filing of forms, it is pretty easy as compared to that of India. The HMRC website is pretty clear in terms of what forms we need to file in. There is a specific qualification, as I mentioned, other than CIA or relating to tax, which is CPA, which is other than CA, which is the highest qualification for tax professionals in UK. Again, this is one exam which we can potentially take sitting in India. We can appear for it, and we can have that as our basis or qualification if we want to cater this kind of segment in the services. The filing requirements, compliance requirements in UK are pretty smooth as compared to that of India. So individuals up to certain level who just have salaried income don't have any requirement to file the return, right? However, there are quite a lot of nuances when the individuals have other income in the form of property income from other jurisdiction like India, wherein the DTA comes in picture, or individuals have capital gains tax. That is something what I have observed from my experience is not something people do it on their own or people do it through their organization. It's basically comes down to the individual practitioners or who are working in UK who cater. Quite a lot of time the way this market is structured is more of local. Like in India, you would give your tax return to a person who's close to you, whom you have heard of. The similar way the market functions there as well. However, there are quite a lot of individual practitioners, Indian practitioners as well, right? And we have seen quite a lot of instances wherein they are getting the work, but then they are treating Indian firms or affiliations with Indian firms as their base to carry out the actual groundwork. And this is the area where we can fit in as well, because this thing also interacts with the Indian laws and regulations where people have presence or roots in India, and everyone needs to be aware of the Indian tax laws as well. The third thing, like we have direct tax and indirect tax here in India, wherein indirect tax now is under GST, some sort of customs as well, but not necessarily related to our work predominantly. In UK just has value added tax. Now the turnover, there is a turnover threshold. If you look at, just as a part, obviously I won't go in the detail, but just to give you a perspective, the structure of the VAT law is pretty much similar to that of India. It is less complicated as well because there are no state-wise tax laws, VAT laws like we had back in India. So there are less complexities when it comes to input tax credit and stuff. So this is something which quite a lot of organizations outsource as well. So quite a lot of small and medium size organizations do not have these expertise back in UK. Again, the kind of scope and the exact services which are being provided by small scale practitioners in UK or medium sized firms as well, I have listed down on a separate slide later on, but this is just in terms of the regulatory landscape. Other than that, sir also mentioned about the restructuring and insolvency. So UK does have Insolvency Act as well. There are insolvency professionals who work with the companies which make insolvent to be really fair and square and practically being practical here, quite a lot of these insolvency happens at a PI, which is public listed entity, interest entity, or at a listed level. So quite a lot of the restructuring or insolvency work is kind of carried out by the global accounting firms or the global firms which have relatively easier connect or easier reach through when it comes to this. There is a separate certification as well for insolvency professional, which we need to take over and above the practicing certificate, just like we have here, to act as a insolvency professional back in UK. So these are the regulatory landscape. All in all, the structure is pretty same, rightly so, because we have inherited all the laws from UK. So the Companies Act, accounting standard, be it taxation laws, like the way tax works here, slab rates, deductions, the similar things are there in UK as well. So I wouldn't see quite a lot of differences when it comes to having those basic understandings about the laws and regs in UK. Now I will just go through the service offerings and kind of compare it the Indian scenario and try to give you a nuances which happen in UK as well. As I mentioned, bookkeeping services. Now the way bookkeeping services could be structured or the opportunities could be explored by members here in India, again, as I mentioned, is to kind of go through the organic growth, as we call it, wherein we have the counterparts in UK of the Indian companies which have similar system, similar business model, similar processes, and mainly the similar people involved. So potentially we can try to have a first crack on those entities wherein we have UK counterparts. The accounting mainly in UK environment is done on systems, even if it is a small scale or medium sized entity. Generally UK entities are known to have subscription or licenses for cloud based systems which can be operated through anywhere, something like Workday, SAP as well. It could be because of the easy availability, but generally that is what their expectation would be if we were to cater to the bookkeeping services in the UK. In terms of the filing requirements, like obviously we have bookkeeping services, we divide it in 2 to 3 parts. One is basically day-to-day accounting. Again, there is no difference in Indian and UK scenario wherein in UK there is some difference in the way they account for it. It's pretty much the same. But quite a lot of these services are automated in UK. When I say automated, is in UK, the companies, the management, the organizations prefer to have the automatic trail of transactions throughout, and they rely quite a lot on quite a lot of automatic controls. Like in India, we do have vouchers, we do have bills which are hard copy. Generally, the preference in the UK is to have everything in the soft on the system, which is governed by their automatic controls. So potentially having that kind of infrastructure in India to demonstrate it to our UK clients would be helpful, wherein we can demonstrate the fact that the accounting and the underlying support basis which the accounting is done is flowing through the system, available at the fingerprints, and everything is managed through the automatic environment in the system, because the focus there is on the IT side of things more as compared to India. In terms of the filing requirements, like we have quite a lot of filing requirements here in India with respect to tax, which is also linked to bookkeeping, like our TDS returns, like our VAT returns, which generally come from our books of accounts, right, where we try to give in the ledger extract, try to match it with the returns, and then it transforms into the VAT consultancy services. But UK has already reached that level wherein they have simplified quite a lot of these. So in terms of bookkeeping services, the kind of filing requirements which we should be aware of is the annual filing statement, annual filing requirement with Companies House, which is our MCA. Quite a lot of companies have also got requirement for XBRL filing Obviously, it depends on the criteria and the sector in which they operate, but XBRL tax softwares are also available on the UK website. So it's not something we have to do it on our own. Obviously, we will need a subscription or some kind of access to those softwares to be able to put XBRL version, but in terms of the filing requirements, these are the filing requirements what we have. Other than that, there are quarterly confirmation statements which we need to, or companies need to do. Now again, why I am focusing that, in Indian context, quite a lot of management filing is not necessarily outsourced to chartered accountants. However, in UK, the culture is if they are outsourcing bookkeeping services, they would outsource that as a bundle with payroll services as well. So generally the approach there is to look at entire gamut of services as a whole rather than just passing the entries or preparation of financial statements. So that is how potentially we could position ourselves if we were to provide bookkeeping services to the UK clients. Potentially first tracking down on Indian counterparts, second Indian owned businesses, third potentially there are quite a lot of forums as well and quite a lot of international conferences related to accounting which happen in UK. You can also see the information about those conferences wherein we can network with our counterparts or counterparts in UK. I recently saw one accounting conference which is held on yearly basis in UK, which is called Accountex, wherein accounting professionals all over the globe come in, and ICAI dignitaries from London chapter had also attended that. So that is something to keep an eye out for. And another aspect of these bookkeeping services is whatever I have focused right now is being stationed in India and providing services in UK. However, in UK, it is quite common for companies to have or hire contractors, just like retainers in Indian scenarios. So basically there are few payroll compliances or payroll obligations if company employs. So what they generally do is small and medium sized practitioner companies hire the consultants. They pay consultants on either on deliverable basis or on per hour basis, wherein the consultant is expected to come to their company's premises once a week, thrice a week, whatever, and they pay based on number of hours. Now, quite a lot of these service providers are UK-based small and medium-sized firms as well. So that is the kind of market which is also open, but that may require our presence in UK as well if we want to cater to that market. Generally, these markets are called as contractors, right? And quite a lot of these opportunities, I mean, again, I'm not vouching or anything, but quite a lot of these opportunities can be accessed or can be checked through UK-based recruiters. So quite a lot of UK recruitment when it comes to the contractor happens to UK based recruiters who are available on LinkedIn online, and you can potentially search. Obviously there would be numerous of them. Also there would be quite a lot of recruitment portals, like we have different portals. I don't want to name any specific one, but I can tell you after the training as well. But there are quite a lot of these portals which have these platforms wherein companies put in their requirements and then we can approach based on our CV and the profile. But yeah, this is all about bookkeeping services. From the holistic perspective, I thought this would be useful. But if you have any specific questions or any specific thing you want to know or understand, I can potentially explain a bit more from specific point of view.
In case of VAT, there is no any monthly.
Yeah, I'll come to that separately. I have a separate slide on indirect taxation, but I'll come to that separately in the next slide, if that's okay. But just in terms of bookkeeping, and quite a lot of this, if you just look at the other side of things, right, audit side of things, which is where quite a lot of contribution is coming from these global capability centers back in India, wherein the firms are subcontracting the work to Indian setups, wherein all the supports, all the audit evidences are being sent through online portal over secure portal. People in India do perform auditing procedures like vouching, ledger scrutiny and whatnot on them, and then they document the work for them, and that is how the work product goes across to UK. So this is more of a bookkeeping, but even this is happening on the auditing side as well. I wouldn't expect quite a lot of individual practitioners in UK doing that subcontracting on the auditing front, because there are not quite a lot of transactions, but there are quite a lot of Indian chartered accountancy firm involved in auditing, which are quite medium size or quite large compared to the small practitioner or individual practitioner in terms of the scale. So potentially we can have some sort of, or members here can look at affiliations with those chartered accountancy firm as well, because now there is increasing focus on these things to be outsourced, even on the administrative side when it comes to the CA firms, like handling billing, handling their invoicing, handling quite a lot of their internal accounting and processing of data. Quite a lot of that is also being outsourced to setups in India. So yeah, that is all about bookkeeping services as well. Just in terms of bookkeeping, while I move forward, there are some developments which are happening on accounting framework front in the UK. So right now, as I mentioned, the UK GAAP FRS 101, 102 is more of old accounting standard which we had back in when those were issued by ICAI. Similarly, UK is proposing to shift to IFRS in accounting framework as well. So IFRS 15 equivalent of UK GAAP is being proposed in next few years, potentially in 2026, 2027. I'm not sure yet about the date, but that is something from FAS point of view as well, which we can think of, as far as UK market is concerned. Yeah. So basically, when back in India we moved from our normal Indian GAAP to Ind AS or IFRS, there was a lot of focus on IFRS 15 in terms of how to recognize the revenue. There were quite a lot of complications, quite a lot of factors to be considered, and quite a lot of our chartered accountancy firm gave advisory to the client to help them how to comply with their standards and how to have their processes aligned to the standard. So practically, if you look at it from principal perspective, nothing changes, but there are quite a lot of noise around the 5 factors in terms of identification of agreements, contract, the way you recognize revenue at once or over time, the way you would classify the revenue contracts in terms of principal agent relationship. So a lot of clarity came in through the IFRS or Ind AS as well, which was not necessarily existing back in our original accounting standards as well, which probably Lokesh would have worked in olden days when it came to transforming. So in the similar way, UK market is also shifting from the old accounting to new or IFRS in accounting standards, wherein business advisory services or accounting advisory services would be targeted at these small and medium scale enterprises, because as a business owner or as people who are working on the other side, people generally get frightened when there are such major changes in the revenue recognition model or revenue recognition framework which comes into the play. So that is something which is on its way in near future as well. Apart from, like, we have bookkeeping services, we do also cater to quite a lot of clients back in India on internal audit and controls related work. Now, this kind of work would be phased into two major service offerings, right? Wherein we do perform the internal audit of a client, or we help clients set up their processes, or we do have ICFR back in India, which is a Companies Act requirement as well, right? So we can help client or we can assist client in having their risk control matrix being set up, or to help them design or assist them design controls, ensure the controls are operating effectively and complying with the ICFR framework. Back in UK, there is no Companies Act requirement for for auditors to report on the like we have a separate audit report in Indian environment on the ICFR front. There is no separate audit report which is required to be issued in UK under the Companies Act, right? Indian Companies Act also has a requirement for appointment of internal auditor if the company meets some threshold. Likewise, there is no such requirement in UK Companies Act regulations as well, which would open up the market in terms of internal audit services are concerned, right? So that kind of regulatory requirement is not there. However, there is definitely a culture in UK to have a robust internal audit or control. There is a lot of focus on the control and effectiveness of control as far as UK environment is concerned. So generally, small and medium sized enterprises do have their in-house internal audit department of 1 or 2 people who cater. Generally, it's not a complicated role, but members who are ICI members with relevant qualifications, global qualifications like CIA, CFP as well, could potentially land up in those roles as far as internal audit is concerned in UK. When I say there is no regulatory requirement, yes, there are some nuances wherein entities in UK are also required to follow the same amount of control framework or control regulatory requirements. Those nuances being UK entities which are subsidiaries of NYSE listed companies, right? If they are material component or they are component of US listed companies, then naturally they need to comply with the SOX framework, which necessitates them to have internal control framework being established, processes being established, to have process flows, process charts in place, have their internal control matrix in place. So that is where kind of internal audit or risk advisory exposure comes in, or the scope comes in for the Indian Chartered Accountants as far as UK market is concerned. Also, there are talks of or there have been few discussions around introduction of UK, something equivalent to Indian ICFR in UK as well, in the same lines, because UK also wants to align their framework and their reporting framework with US. So that is one of the criteria which has been in discussion for past few years, wherein there has been some discussion in FRC which was published as well around implementation of those requirements, but nothing has been materialized till date as far as concerned. So potentially from internal audit and controls environment, I think the opportunities lie on the employment side rather than members in practice side, unless we have the internal audit line back in India and it has its counterpart in UK which we can cater to. But that's just my personal view based on my experience. So this is around the internal audits or controls, unless anyone has anything more specific to know. Yeah.
So, as far as the FRF is concerned, so financial reporting framework is concerned.
Yes.
Of India as compared to the UK.
Yeah.
Which one is simpler according to you?
Financial reporting framework, I would say, is pretty much similar. I would divide UK accounting framework in 2 parts. One is IFRS, because there is a requirement to follow IFRS for all listed entities, and there is something called as public interest entities, which are generally your banks, insurance companies, or which have significant public influence, those are generally the companies which follow IFRS, right? Which is potentially you can compare that with our Ind AS, right? The accounting framework what we follow here in India. So that is pretty similar, I would say. Less of complications because all the listed entities in India have requirement to have limited reviews done, in terms of the compliance, right? Limited reviews done every quarter, but that's not the requirement for UK listed entities. Only FTSE, like we have Nifty 50 here, there are some indices there as well, and those entities which fall within those indices are required to do. So accounting framework wise, it is pretty much similar, I would say. But for private entities, it is a lot more simpler back in UK because they have quite a lot of exemptions within Companies Act and within accounting framework. Just to give you a small example, right? There are quite a lot of exemptions around disclosure requirements, or like cash flow, related party transactions, or requirement to consolidation if you have UK parent which is publishing those disclosures at consolidated level. So say for example, if you have a UK company or a UK parent which is presenting or publishing consolidated financial statements or consolidated accounts publicly, right, on companies' accounts, with having all those disclosures, you as a subsidiary of that entity are not required to do that in your standalone financial statements. So yes, accounting, recognition, measurement wise similar, but quite a lot of simplified approach being followed in UK on disclosure and presentation and compliance requirement is what I feel.
So basically time and efforts that are consumed over here for member in practice for completing.
I would say potentially more in India as compared to that in UK. And obviously it's also about like from my personal experience, right? Because I have audited in India for 7 years as well as a part of my articleship and my stint with Grant Thornton, and now I have equally done my course bit in EY as well. Just in terms of the overall processes, overall transparency, overall culture, I think it is a lot more streamlined in UK in terms of providing the data, in terms of following the timelines. It is a lot more simpler, lot more constructive in UK from my experience as compared to that of India as well. So if you are looking at in terms of your efforts, right, obviously if you are new member trying to cater into those markets, you would have some base work to be done, but you would naturally expect to spend less time or efforts in UK or for UK client as compared to India from your costing or budgeting perspective. Yes. Cool. Just in terms of corporate taxation and potentially, if I was to compare again corporate taxation, I will cater to the personal taxation later on because I wanted to combine that with NRI taxation as well, which has overlap. But in terms of corporate taxation, again, potentially it is far more simpler approach wherein there are no major filing requirements for corporates other than their annual tax returns. The amount of disputes, the amount of notices or amount of regulatory invention is far less as far as small and medium price enterprises are concerned as compared to what I have seen in India as well. Quite a lot of deductions, quite a lot of tax adjustments are pretty straightforward when it comes to the UK taxation, and there is obviously as the things get complex, things get at a larger scale in terms of the listed entities, in terms of the pies, yes, things do become complicated, but as far as small and medium scale enterprises are concerned, I haven't seen quite a lot of large tax compliances or tax demands, tax notices, or that kind of work happening in UK, even in global accounting forget the individual practitioners as well. So kind of the regulatory environment, regulatory processes seem to be well settled in UK. Those are well settled in India as well now. But the kind of volume, the kind of work we have in India as a chartered accountant, I feel that is not the extent of that is not the same when it comes to UK or for UK private entities. As far as your filing requirements are concerned, we do have different filing requirements here as part of management as well as a part of auditors as well. The requirement to have tax audit done, the requirement to file the TDS returns on part of management, the requirement on account of GST audit being done on indirect taxes. There is no such requirement tax audit back in UK. So basically, it's just the corporate tax return which entities need to file with HMRC. Obviously, there are different forms which they need to fill with respect to payment of tax and stuff like that. But if you look at the documentary evidences or procedures which we require, which we need to do, it is pretty much straightforward when it comes to UK tax environment. And I haven't seen quite a lot of to and fro's with regulatory authority or long outstanding disputes as well. In fact, some places wherein the entities are quite large, the entities are quite of public interest, there are discussions with the authority to discuss the tax position as well in advance, so that it doesn't create any issues further in terms of the tax liability. So from our perspective, as far as us ICI members are concerned, potentially we do have a scope in terms of what kind of service offerings I have seen in corporate taxation is around the compliance requirement as well. A bit of advisory work if entity has multi-geography presence. That is where kind of the compliance requirements increase with respect to your transfer pricing or with respect to having that interaction between those geographies. So definitely, if there are UK entities which have presence in India, which have subsidiaries in India, definitely they prefer to engage specialists rather than managing it on their own in terms of tax compliances. So quite a lot of the UK entities which have presence in India do outsource directly the work to Indian firms because of their counterpart present here, and quite a lot of inflow of work would be expected out there. If we want to cater to the UK clients filing of UK tax return, you could potentially visit. I'm going to share this presentation so you can go on the website, but it is a pretty straightforward process in terms of having that, like we have requirements to have apply for PAN, create PAN. There is just one government security ID number which is kind of already created when company first registers, and then there are no registration requirements as well. So it is quite straightforward. But yeah, again, in terms of predominant service offerings, we would potentially focus on the Indian companies who have counterparts, because quite a lot of requirements are driven in UK regulations wherein we pay taxes or where we are subjected to taxation in foreign jurisdiction and taking credit of that. So maybe having those certifications being done, having those advisory in terms of EDS, deductions, refunds, inputs is something we could focus on in terms of our service offerings from corporate tax point of view. In terms of the employment side as well, there are quite a lot of Indian chartered accountants who are working with these global accounting firms in UK. There is no specific in terms of experience, my experience in terms of people who are working in tax in these global accounting firms, there is no prerequisite requirement for us to have any UK specific qualification. So like Indian chartered accountants, on the basis of the CA degree and ICI membership, are working in global accounting firms as well in UK without any additional qualifications. So as far as members who are willing to look at or are exploring employment opportunities back in UK, potentially corporate taxation is where our work experience gets recognized, and there are avenues open on these global accounting firms as well as the industry companies as well. Before we move to indirect tax, is there anything which you would want me to clarify or anything you feel I need to focus on? I mean, I'm just putting more from overall point of view. Yeah.
So, if we are going to the UK,
Yeah.
then I think from what I understand is it is better being in employment rather than being in practice, because in practice, if everything is streamlined, simplified, then I don't think.
Yeah.
We are
So.
not used to that.
Sorry.
We are not used to simply.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't consider that necessarily. I wouldn't consider that necessarily.
But yeah, I think how will we sustain in practice?
Yeah. So no. So there are quite a lot of practitioners, and it's not like practice is not booming. It's also about the volume game, right? As in, obviously, yes, a lot of compliance requirements create a lot of work for chartered accountants as well, right? However, in terms of the UK practitioners, the practitioners here are not service offering specific. So suppose if you have a client, right, you can cater to all these services at once as well, and there are quite a lot of companies as well. So it's also the kind of volume game. What you are, and I can totally appreciate your view. If nothing is complicated, why would people come to us for chartered accountant? However, you think of it from the point of view of people residing there who don't have exposure to tax, right? Quite a lot of people, if something is not complicated, would file your return on their own back in India. But when it comes to how it works practically in UK, they just rely on the specialist and they just outsource. So there are not quite a lot of in-house or even if they were to do bookkeeping and accounting in-house, they would need to have employees being appointed. Now, just to give you a perspective from UK environment, right? Having an employee is more cumbersome because the employment laws in UK are pretty strict, right? I mean, our labor laws are also taken. It's not like a US wherein you have hire and fire culture, right? We can just hire, the other day we can fire. So there are quite a lot of employee taxes, like something like national insurance, which employers need to pay over, something into PF, but more cumbersome from UK employers over past years, right, which UK need to incur. So if you look at it from their perspective, for them it is better to have it outsourced rather than having an in-house employee, because that way they can have quite a lot of services covered through one service offering rather than having to employ multiple employees there, right? Because a chartered accountant not necessarily there would have expertise in audit, VAT, bookkeeping, everything, right? They are pretty much specialized. And I mean, just because you are on that topic, naturally we, and the way it works in UK, and I was quite shocked to know it as well. Like in India, we after 10 or SSC, we have science, commerce and arts, right? You wouldn't have a lot of CAs coming in from arts background, do we? It's unusual, right? There, the person who's doing, there is no prerequisite for someone to be from finance account to have. There people more believe in skill-based profession and what they like. So people working with me have done their bachelor's or graduation in archaeology, and they are pursuing chartered accountancy now, right? So it's not like a streamlined passage wherein you have BCom, Bachelor of Accounting, and then you are doing CA. So something, if not complicated or straightforward, even a graduate or person who's not necessarily a professional can do it. It's not like that. So the overall kind of setup is a bit different. And I think even though I completely agree that there are less complications, but in terms of demand, supply, and in terms of volume as well, practice is pretty favorable in my view as far as UK is concerned. And because of this internal preference for outsourcing and that kind of requirement as well. So I wouldn't suggest that we necessarily conclude on the fact that practice is not, it's more also about the volume game as well, which we need to cater to. But yeah.
So,
Yeah.
just on that point,
Yeah.
in terms of revenue, right? If the,
Revenue,
in
yeah.
terms of revenue, right? So we were actually working on one of the companies,
Yeah.
and it was a listed company. So,
Right. Listed in India or UK?
No, you.
In UK. Okay.
Yeah. But the revenue that the auditor was receiving, and which he would have received if he was in India, was quite less. Which was what our experience was. Our experience.
I mean, I am not sure about any specific scenario, but I will just give you an overall picture about how audit fees are as a percentage of revenue, right? I think audit fees in UK as a percentage of revenue are more as compared to India. And it is also because if you, obviously if you have worked on a UK client, you would be aware there are, for the listed clients, there is obviously a regulator who's sitting, FRC, which kind of inspects auditors like NFRA does here, right, in India. And if you look at the FRC reports, right, FRC report necessarily looks at the audit fees as well, because the way they look at it is the kind of audit fees the firms earn, the year-on-year comparison, or the kind of concentration. If one audit firm is earning significant chunk of revenue from one audit client, that is also construed as an independence threat. You know what I mean? And if you look at the FRC inspection reports or FRC reports which are published on annual basis every August, you will see year-on-year increase in the audit fees as well. So I wouldn't say as far as the overall, it might be in your case, but as far as overall efforts are concerned, I would say it's proportion of efforts as against fee, that ratio is relatively favorable back in UK, and I think still there is no I mean, at least in my experience, I haven't seen something like undercutting, underbidding, or something like that scenario being prevalent in UK, and that is also quite evident from these yearly reports which get published as well, right? So I would be, from my personal experience, I would be pretty shocked to see year-on-year decrease in audit fees, or year-on-year audit fees being same, or something like that. And the environment which I have seen or I have experienced, it is quite transparent when it comes to changes in the scope, when it comes to additional deliverables being asked and the fees for that, because the FRC has got that level of scrutiny over audit and non-audit services, audit and non-audit fees, the amount of fees you charge for audit, non-audit services, the amount of fees you charge to network firm as well. So there is quite a lot of scrutiny as well. So I wouldn't, at least from my experience, I haven't seen any, like revenue being significantly lower as compared to what we need to do in terms of the efforts in auditing environment as well. In advisory or in tax, the way I told you, right, quite a lot, there are a couple of arrangements. One is either you work as an in-house contractor, wherein you have a liberty to charge client on an hourly basis or based on the time you spend, which is ideally what we would want in ideal world as well. Or if you are outsourcing it to a firm, quite a lot of times the fees are determined by the number of deliverables which we have. So that is where we kind of put in terms of the fees or revenue context. And potentially, there could be a scenario wherein if you are working for a UK listed company, right, there could be a scenario wherein you may not be able to sign the audit report in UK because that has some different requirements altogether. But there could be a element of outsourcing arrangement as well, and the proportion of revenue you share, based in India with the person who's outsourcing. So, but yeah, other than that, I don't see any concerns with respect to professionals being underpaid in UK for the work they do. Yeah, coming to the section around indirect tax advisory. So again, as I mentioned, the predominant act, yes, there is customs in UK as well, but 95% of their indirect tax revenue, 99% comes from the indirect tax. The structure is pretty simple, like what we had in India. In India back in the day, we had VAT laws which were state specific, right? And then there were complexities around return filing in every state, input tax credit, blah blah blah, and disputes arising out of that. UK being one small country, there are no such complications when it comes to input tax credit or complications around different regulatory authorities involved. There is just one act, UK VAT Act 1994, right, which governs it. There is just one jurisdiction in terms of the offerings, as you asked before. I think from my experience and what I've seen around in medium-sized firm as well in UK, I think predominant service offerings relate to VAT registrations, VAT returns, and the record keeping. In terms of VAT registrations, again, because there are no different states, it's just one registration per entity and not per state or per province or per council. So VAT registration is pretty simplified process. I have added some links at the end of the presentation as well, which can kind of help you navigate what are the thresholds, revenue thresholds which are required. Revenue thresholds are relatively very large. It's 85,000 pounds, which is 85. Now it's increased to 90, in fact, pounds of taxable turnover, which is equivalent to 1 CR a year. VAT returns, there is a requirement to file returns on quarterly basis under UK laws. So yes, that requirement still stays. This is the main requirement where quite a lot of people do outsource to chartered accountants, because obviously they don't have in-house expertise and they can't afford to have one person just doing these three things for all year around, right? The pattern of invoicing is pretty much set. There are no complications around. I remember in our VAT laws there were specifics around what is to be included on the invoice, what specific details are required. Similarly, they have, but it is pretty much settled. So it's not a new VAT act like in Dubai or UAE, wherein we need to start setting up the process. So I think quite a lot of businesses are would outsource, and we could have these as our service offerings here. Again, in terms of the regulatory scrutiny, it is relatively lower. I would say it is still present, but relatively lower as compared to what we have in India. And it's not because something which UK is doing better. It's just because UK as a country is pretty small and has one authority. So naturally there would be less complications, less subjectivity, less interactions between different authorities as well, which would help them streamlining these processes as well. Just to give you a context of how many Indian VAT importers or exporters are there, which would potentially be our first crack if we as members in practice were to cater. There are around 9,000 UK VAT registered businesses that export goods to India or have interactions with India. At the same time, there are around 16,000 UK VAT registered businesses which are importing goods from India. So naturally, obviously I don't have any more insight other than this, but naturally from these figures I would imagine these entities to be affiliates or somewhere connected to Indian undertakings, wherein we can try to explore the UK VAT returns as well. Again, there is no specific qualification that is required for catering on VAT services other than the CTA which I mentioned. So it is pretty much plain vanilla, one act which we can easily kind of read through and master upon and try to cater these services across in the UK. Again, on the taxation front, the employment side, if you are indirect tax professional who is seeking employment opportunities in UK, the experience what we gain here is recognized in UK as well. Quite a lot of my friends, quite a lot of people I know are employed by UK global accounting mid-size firm in the area, in the field of indirect taxation, purely basis the exposure and the indirect tax experience they have here without any extra qualification. So it is quite a smooth path in terms of the employment opportunities as well in indirect tax. Now, in terms of the NRI tax advisory, obviously we are all aware because essentially these are our Indian clients only, but just wanted to highlight on the fact that even though we say there are 2 million UK residents, there are these many Indians, but it is needless to say that quite a lot of these immigrants are not third or fourth generation immigrants. These are first or second generation immigrants who have their roots back in India, either in the form of family, extended family, or in the form of some establishment back in India, like me, right? So these are the people who have connections in India, they do have financial transactions in India, and they do have, they are subjected to the Indian regulatory requirement and regulatory requirement as well. So we can potentially have these as our potential clients as well from scope perspective, because quite a lot of people back in UK are not aware about the regulatory updates which keep on coming in. Quite a lot of people in UK struggle to find a good advice because there are quite a lot of significant transactions they undertake here in India in the form of property purchase, property sales, any legacy businesses, stakes being sold and stuff like that. Quite a lot of people are domiciled in UK. Now it is no more a concept, but still high net worth individuals who have their establishment back in India and who are looking out for chartered accountant back in India. So these are the people potentially we can cater to, potentially charge billing in GBP as well because of the consumption being there, and have some kind of leverage of our Indian presence here in India and acquaintance with the regulatory environment. So this is one of the key aspects. Quite a lot of things and regulatory compliance requirements are also required. Just to give my example, fortunately I have my father as a CA who is quite close to these things, but even in terms of opening NRO, NRE accounts, even if we have NRO, NRE accounts, the kind of TDS which get deducted even on simple interest, which we may want to claim it as refund. So even in these small transactions, even in case of insurance policies or maturity proceeds which we receive as an individual but not present in the country, kind of investments which are not allowed to be held by NRI, which we need to liquidate when we move abroad in the form of PPF or others, government linked savings. So these are quite a lot of small things as well, wherein individual needs CA advice or CA input to kind of manage, administer, and kind of efficiently give them higher returns as well. So CAs potentially can look at investment advisory and consultancy services as well, because as far as financial front is concerned, potentially first thing goes back to the CA as far as any person is concerned. So yeah, these are the kind of services which I tried to bouquet in my slides, but let me know if you have any specific services on your mind. I have consciously not included audit services here. I would like to give a minute or two on that, but there are quite a lot of extensive requirements out there, wherein even after obtaining the certificate on practice, we need to have we need to be designated as responsible individual by ICAI-EW. There are some additional exams which we need to give or appear for if we want to sign balance sheet in the UK, and there are quite a lot of compliance requirements as well. Having said that, it's not a tough mountain to climb, but again, there are few requirements which we need to be aware of when we do on the statutory audit side of things. Again, if we were to audit or if we were to get involved in the PI, there are some registration requirements as well from FRC, like NFRA here in India, which we need to focus on. So this was more about for members in practice and what sort of environment or nuances we have back in UK. But let me know if you want to know anything specific on any specific aspect which I might have not covered here in my presentation. We can speak after the training as well. Now, in terms of employment opportunities as well, right? So first, I would just give you a background as in the way we could explore employment opportunities as well. So quite a lot of services in UK, be it audit, be it internal audit, be it corporate taxation, be it indirect taxation, do not necessarily need prerequisite, or it's not a prerequisite that you need to have UK qualification. By myself, as you have seen, I don't have any UK qualification when I got the job as well. So it's the ICAI qualification, the Indian exposure on various front, potentially the international front as well, if we have, is quite sufficient for us to land an opportunity in the employment market in the UK. In terms of finding the opportunities, I would say in terms of accounting firms, quite a lot of accounting firms, or almost all the accounting firms, publish the vacancies or opportunities on their website, right? I think website is the best source if someone wants to explore. The job descriptions there are quite detailed as well. Potentially, if you are aware of any internal employee or member, there is a referral programs as well in all these firms, which can help you speed up the process. Again, the process across in these firms, in these organizations, is pretty transparent. Just to give you a perspective, I have never met a HR person in last 6 months. All these things happen back end, not in front end. The interviewers and everyone gets assigned through a centralized process. There is a streamlined, specified process to process the CVs, getting back to the CVs, and quite a lot of these the opportunities are available on the careers portal. You may not come across any scenario wherein there is a vacancy but it's not available, it's not published on their website, because it's one of the requirements of the UK government as well. If you want to hire someone external or outside country, you need to publish the advertisement to give locals a fair chance to apply for that role from their perspective as well. When we are looking at the employment opportunities, I think the key considerations which I'm going to cover very quickly in next slide is around the immigrations, right? So technically, if you are exploring any UK-based employment opportunities, you need to have certificate of sponsorship from a UK Home Office authorized sponsorer. When I say UK Home Office, is technically similar to Home Ministry in India. So Home Ministry has given some licenses or have authorized some organizations to act as a sponsorer and provide certificate of sponsorship to someone who's being hired from across the border, right? So they do have authority to give you certificate of sponsorship, basis which you can take and apply for the visa, and UK government would grant you the visa, right? So these list of official sponsors is also available on UK's Home Office website. Just letting you know, because this could be one of the parameters when you are trying to search your job opportunities. You need to check if there, as an Indian citizen, if that organization is UK Home Office authorized sponsor or not, right? For us to be able to get that sponsorship. Again, as I mentioned before, UK specific qualifications are not prerequisite. Opportunities can be explored and can be availed based on Indian qualification and the experience as well. There is a specific scheme which was launched by UK government in line with Indian government, wherein the visas were granted to Indian citizens for a period of 2 years, wherein opportunities, I think this is a lottery based visa system, wherein visas were granted by UK government. The lottery opens once a year in July. This is over and above sponsorship, by the way. Lottery opens once in a year, wherein if you get you can apply for that lottery. If you get visa, you get right to work in UK for 2 years. obviously at the end of 2 years you need to come back to India, but then this is another scheme over and above the sponsorship requirement which I spoke about, which is currently in operation between India and UK government. It is called Indian Young Professional Scheme, Visa Scheme, which you can search online and check if you fall into it. So yeah, in terms of opportunities, quite open, no specific need for qualification. In professional services, in industry, internal audit, industry, taxation department as well, you could potentially get placed, or you could potentially explore based on your India experience. Let me know if you want any specific clarifications or
How
any.
do you apply for these
Yeah, so there is a website. So as I mentioned, this is a lottery based system. So every July, if I'm not wrong, or August, the UK government opens this scheme for 3 to 5 days when you are supposed to apply, or apply for it online. Obviously you don't need any certificate of sponsorship because it is plain for young professionals in India who want to explore the career abroad. You just apply it, the visa gets allotted on lottery basis. Once you get the visa, you can just get it stamped in the Indian consulate based on the letter received from UK government, and then based on that you can go in the UK and explore for opportunities. If you go basis this visa, you can do a business as well in the UK on your own. If you want to get employed in any UK firm or accounting firm, then you don't need a sponsorship for 2 years, because this visa can land you a job in the UK as well.
So I think the age limit is 31.
Yeah, there is a age limit because the premise behind this was to kind of give an opportunity to young professionals to go abroad, get experience, get exposure, and come back. That was the premise when this scheme was announced, actually. But yeah, you can apply up to the age of 31 years. You can apply repeatedly as well if you don't get picked up in lottery at once. In my view, there is no restrictions on the number of times you can apply for this visa. Anything else on employment, if anyone? Yeah, just in terms of immigration rules, this is also more specific for people moving on employment, or people who intend to have a base in UK. So generally the kind of visas which are available for Indian citizen when it comes to relocating, when it comes to exploring employment opportunities, there are work permits which UK government gives. The work permits are generally granted for 3 years, which can be renewed by your employer for 3 years. These work permits can be only given by authorized sponsors, as I mentioned. Once you spend 5 years in the UK on any work permit or any visa other than the tourist visa or young visa, you get permanent residency as well of the UK. Once you have the permanent residency, you have all the rights of to carry out your own business. Basically, you just don't need any certificate of sponsorship to be in UK. It's kind of equivalent of green card in US, if people have heard of that, and that just streamlines your process on the immigration front. I would just like to kind of give out of my personal experience. I would just like to also highlight the fact that it's not only fair to compare the absolute gross numbers in terms of the revenue. Obviously, if you multiply something by 100, the figure becomes a bit more and bit more catchy. As we always say, grass is greener on the other side. Obviously, when you are in UK, when you are relocating to UK, you also spend in pounds, wherein you also multiply your spending in pounds and the tax structure as well. As Ketan sir rightly mentioned in the beginning, definitely the economy is growing at a modest rate of 1% over the last few years. The tax rates in the UK are obviously there is some basic exemption limit up to £12,500. Then the tax rate range between 12%, 40%. It goes as high as 60% as well on the employment income, other than the national insurance, which employers need to pay and which we need to pay as well as an employee. So definitely, whenever exploring any kind of opportunities, would necessarily kind of suggest you all to also consider the cost of living and other aspects rather than just having multiplying by 100 when it looks a bit greener, right? As I thought as well before I made my decision, until expenses hit me hard. Yeah, so that is on immigration as well. Only 2 to 3 kind of visas, but yes, these visas are not limited in number. These are quite large. There is no limit on the number of visas which can be issued by UK. So even though there are 2 to 3 types, the volume is enormous, and that's what you can see by the numbers as well of Indians who are residing abroad. These are few links which I have put in. I've already shared the presentation with WRC. Potentially we can share it with the participants as well. But these are like in India, MCA doesn't publish, or the financial statements are not publicly available for private companies. But in UK, financial statements are available for all entities. So if you go on the Companies House, if you type the entity name, even if it is a private entity, the financial statements are available. So those are kind of pretty good starting point for all of us if we want to compare financial statements, accounting policies, the disclosures and the framework and stuff around that. So these are few useful links which I thought. Always happy to be reached out on LinkedIn as well if you have any specific query. Though I'm not an expert in all these fields, but I can definitely try to get in touch with the respective people and help our members out. And yeah, that's it from my end. Thank you.
Can you share the salary bands of Big Fours in UK?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it all depends on the kind of profile you get and the kind of report as well, because there are quite a lot. If you have any specific profile or anything, I can share it with you by that. Yeah.
So when we are talking about employment in UK, are we predominantly talking about like employment in London only, or there are others?
No, there are other cities as well. So sorry if I came across as opportunities in UK only mean opportunities in London. That's not the case. Quite a lot of mid-tier or large cities are also having business hubs now. Like we have Mumbai, which is the financial capital of the country, but we do have Mumbai, we do have Bangalore, we do have Delhi, Bangalore. Likewise, there are quite a lot of smaller cities as well, which have business hubs. There are some IT hubs, there are some media, telecom hubs as well in and around London. So to name a few, quite a lot of professional services firms have got office in Manchester, Leeds, back in Wales as well. Even in Scotland, there are quite a lot of businesses, quite a lot of Indians as well who are residing in Edinburgh, Glasgow, which is a new financial hub as far as Scotland is concerned. So yes, opportunities are not only limited to London, but are also definitely there and you can have these opportunities being visible on the careers website as well of respective, wherein they have opportunities by respective cities as well, and quite a lot of these small cities are on the rise.
So in terms of opportunities for members in business, so do the companies there require physical presence, or it can be?
No. So naturally, right? I mean, if I was to answer your question very practically, right? Companies would get in touch with chartered accountants who are visible to them, right? Like if I just think of it, taking a step back practically, if I am a private limited company, a business owner in UK, or a medium scale company or relatively large company, I would first of all look out for CAs in and around me, right? So I think naturally the first point of contact would be presence. But to answer your question, there is no requirement for presence, because quite a lot of these medium-sized firms have these accounting platforms which are cloud-based. Quite a lot of interactions, quite a lot of these underlying supports, evidences are online in this age. There is nothing physical at all in UK, right? So there is no prerequisite at all for someone to have UK presence. Definitely UK presence in some form or the other, in the form of affiliation, in the form of some network, would help in terms of generation of business. But in terms of providing, I don't think if you are just focusing on the delivery aspect of your service offering, I don't think there will be any hindrance if you are sitting in India, providing service in India, doing work in India, and just consuming it in UK. I don't think there is any hindrance as well, even on large scale. Yeah.
Is there opportunities like only for younger people are there?
No. There are quite a lot of opportunities for experienced people as well. I think that scheme which we spoke about, young, is only for young members, but even for experienced people as well, there are quite a lot of opportunities as well. However, practically speaking, what happens is when we kind of try to transition between some of the experience might get discounted in a way that as you grow higher and higher, there is a need for more specialization as well sometimes. But not taking away anything from the fact that even at experienced level, if you see the careers website, you would have. To give you an example, even in professional firms, you would have vacancies from director to senior managers to managers on the professional services side of things, whereas on the industry side of things, you would have vacancies which can be availed and explored by the members at CFO, finance controller level as well. So I don't think experience, age is bar in any sense in terms of exploring the opportunities back in UK, in my view. It's just that specific scheme which I mentioned is for the young members, wherein they have an opportunity to explore, learn things, and come back in 2 years.
How can we get leads from UK?
Sorry?
How can we get leads from UK for work?
For starting new work.
As I mentioned, right, I think there are some established channels, as I said, in the form of networks and all that, firm affiliation with some local firms there. But if I was a new member and thinking of kind of at least identifying the opportunities or trying to be aware of opportunities, potentially it's not the most methodological way of working around it, but we can make effective use of the social media. So there are quite a lot of Facebook, Instagram groups of Indians in London and stuff like that, wherein quite a lot of these queries, quite a lot of these requirements are being posted by the NRIs as well, right? There are quite a lot of portals as well. I can name you as well after the training, which we can kind of look at, wherein obviously there are no specific requirements calling out Indian chartered accountants, but yes, there are similar portals wherein we can visit, we can check in terms of any a requirement which would suit the kind of offerings which we are trying to make. So maybe social media, online, some professional apps like LinkedIn and stuff would be helpful. Trying to get in touch with the recruiters back in UK could also be helpful. We look at recruiter in Indian scenario more from employment point of view, but recruiters there also kind of are involved in hiring contractors, which I mentioned, which are basically the service providers as well. So, basically we can try to build up our base. But most organic way in my view would be to first cater to the Indian UK counterparts of the existing Indian clients, which would be relatively easy an efficient way of targeting, in my view, if I was to kind of start exploring the opportunities. But yeah, online, social media, or these apps could be the things. Anything else?
No questions?
Thank you.
So with this we end this series. Thank you, Vikram, for taking out time for this seminar and also making this well articulated presentation. With no doubt, this was the best presentation we have seen in Niryat series. And as you mentioned, this will be circulated by WRC with all the participants. Thank you, everyone. Thanks.